It's like I'm gonna win, and I'm not gonna worry about you giving me the jerk. Well, let's see what we have. And I also know that I'm a bit it all worked out. No,
what time did you start with? 10:30. Be like me, get up 7 o'clock, we'll pick up first.
I got up there at 10:30. Something got a biscuit in it. Then I went up there and worked. And then at 3 o'clock, I said, I got to take a break. Killed me. Absolutely killed me. Couldn't find a Tylenol or ibuprofen anywhere in the place. They're going, well, there used to be some in this county.
This is at Hadrill's?
Yeah.
I was hoping you might be low, so I could call you the equalizer.
No. Oh, Lord. No, it's my third week. I've already collected a paycheck. I get another one tomorrow. That'll take some of the bitterness out when you get the check.
I don't know.
It's really not the bitterness, it's the pain in my legs. So yeah, I bought Skechers. You know when you're older, you don't care what they look like, but your ears are comfortable. So
have you heard of the Hoka?
UFOs?
The Hokas. The Hokas? Hawaiian. With the UFOs. You buy yourself a pair of Hokas, you will never buy another shoe.
Better than the UFOs?
Yeah.
UFOs.
They're funny looking.
You don't take the job, you actually have to have something.
Yeah. I told him, I said, I was really
My brother had a hair.
And I made it fun.
Take a bench, no, these are
I'm trying to
Hokas.
work 5 hours. I've been working from like 11 to 5:30.
We're live. All right. We're here, we're live, we're on the way. 6 o'clock, 5:59 and how many seconds. So we'll call a work session to order. And we'll call roll for work session.
All right. Mr. Barker? Here. Mr. Farman? Here. Mr. Boone? Here. Dr. Houghton?
Here.
Ms. Ray?
Here.
Mr. Rich? Here. Mayor Goodwin?
Here. All right, so up first will be the presentation of the audit findings. I hope we're working here.
Yeah, can you hear me okay? Is it too loud? Is it not loud enough?
How about y'all? Is it loud enough?
Good.
Okay, fine.
Well, thanks for having me, Mr. Mayor, council members. My name is Tim Grove. I am the audit shareholder for the city of Folly Beach. I'm with Elliott Davis. I'm going to start sharing my screen. So for purposes of what we have tonight, we've completed the audit of the city of Folly Beach. We do have still in draft form just because we wanted to have this meeting before we completely buttoned it up. But we're far enough along that feel very comfortable discussing the results of the audit with you. One of the reasons we like to do this part in the work session is give everybody an opportunity to kind of chew on the information. We have some required communications that accompany the audited financial statement, and I'm going to cover most of those this evening. First of all, our first objective is the issuance of an opinion. We were able to issue, or are going to issue, an unmodified opinion on the financial statements for the year ended June 30th, 2021. That's the highest level of assurance that we can provide, which means financial statements that were supplied to us after we made some adjustments to the audit process are materially correct, and I'll talk about that concept in just a minute. But actually, there's two opinions that we issue as a result of this audit, and I'll talk about the second one in a few minutes. So as part of the audit, we're required to communicate certain things that years and years ago we could do all of this verbally, but because of some accounting that's probably been 10, 15 years ago. The CPA modified those communications and required that we provide them in writing. And you have a copy of those formalized communications with you, but I'm going to summarize a couple of those right here. So one of the things as we go through an audit is we sit down and go through a planning process. The danger with any audit is, particularly one we do for several years, is that it gets stale or it's not refreshed, it's not looked at differently. So one of the objectives of the planning process is to kind of go through what we're aware of, the things that impacted the city during the year, and how we would ultimately expect those to impact the financial statements. So one of the things that we are going to do is we're going to gear our audit procedures towards those areas we consider to be most risky from our perspective. Now, we developed those perspectives from our history of auditing the city, auditing entities similar to this city in other governmental agencies. So one of the concepts that comes out through that planning process is the concept of materiality. We don't audit every transaction. So we design through quantitative and qualitative analysis a level that we consider to be significant uses of the financial statement. And then we audit to a number below that. We give every transaction an opportunity through our procedure to be selected, focusing most of our attention on those higher risk areas, but giving even the low risk areas an opportunity to select. So as I mentioned earlier, the audit responsibility under professional standards are the issuance of an opinion, but our audit work has to be done under our internally developed professional standards. When I say internally developed, the accounting profession is largely a self-regulated industry, and we're put to a lot of scrutiny internally and externally. To be an audit firm, we're actually required to have how we audit audited by another firm, so that we're adhering to our professional and regulatory standards. So the other thing that is part of your financial statements that we want to recognize are your significant accounting policies. And when you have a copy of the financial statements, most of those are included in footnote 1. And the objective of footnote 1 is to give the readers of the financial statements a perspective on how transactions for the city are accounted for. Most of those are very similar, but there are some uniqueness depending on the unique circumstances of a particular entity. For the city, some of those would be some of the funds, that beach preservation, beach tax fund, that are unique to the city. The other thing, in every financial statement, there's a certain number of management judgments and accounting estimates that are embedded in financial statements. And we evaluate those significant judgments and estimates to determine whether we would have come to the same conclusion had we been given the facts and circumstances. And we were able to come to the same conclusion. Other things that are required to note are, as I've gone through, I've mentioned the financial statements themselves, the numbers themselves don't always tell the story. So we look to ensure that the city includes disclosures in the financial statements that adequately describe things that can't simply be described by a number. And we determine whether those disclosures represent fairly financial statements in a typical user of financial statements to understand the financial statements. We also include for uncorrected and corrected misstatements. And when I say that, we post certain audit adjustments, and we include those in our communication to you, so you have a perspective on the number and types of audit adjustments that we prepare. As we go to issue financial statements, one of the things that we require is that management perform certain representations. Basically, tell us that they gave it. We didn't have any disagreements with management. We discussed a variety of issues with management, but we're comfortable with those conversations. We felt like we were met at every turn with the answers that we were looking for. We did have a couple of significant deficiencies this year. They were similar to the ones last year. The year-end accrual procedures, we post a number of adjustments as we true up numbers to year-end account according to our, for example, we did a search for unreported liability. We look at accruals year-end to make sure they're booked adequately. So we had a number of those some of those audit adjustments that we had to post. Given the number that we posted, we again feel like that lends itself to a significant deficiency. One of the reasons we have that significant deficiency is you have a small accounting practice, as you know. So another significant deficiency as a result of that is there's a lack of segregation of duties. Just because of the nature and the size of the entity. Now, we're not telling you that we feel like there's a material misstatement because we don't feel like there's a material misstatement. We feel like these two things are things that we need to continue to point out to the organization in case they ever rose to a level of a significant deficiency. So a couple of highlights of the financial statements. We put this chart in here. General fund is usually is the fund that most organizations, most government entities focus on because it's the fund that has the available fund balance, not restricted, for another purpose. This year, total general fund balance increased about $2.5 million. You have a restricted fund balance about $31,000 for victim services. You have some commitments in the fund balance for future capital outlay, claims and judgments, and a couple of other items. But unassigned fund balance is $3.3 million, and I put in their parentheses it's 33% of FY21 expenditures. And there's a reason, and I'll explain why we highlight that number in just a second. But one of the things that we always want to leave every organization with is the reason you want to maintain an adequate fund balance. GFO, the Government Finance Officers Association, and they recommend that governmental entities maintain 2 months worth of general fund expenditure, operating expenditures as fund balance. As I mentioned before, you actually have more than what the GFOA recommends, which is a tremendous place to be and demonstrates fiscal responsibility being demonstrated by the town. I listed a couple of other things here that why you want to maintain that fund balance. Certainly, COVID year has created some challenges that organizations that were adequately funded had the nimbleness to withstand cash outflows as it related to this particular crisis. So, general fund revenues, I always like to do this pie chart to give you kind of an optic view of where the various funding sources come from. As you can see, property taxes make up the significant portion of the revenues earned by the city, followed quickly by business licenses, franchise fees, building permits, and the like. Total revenue was $7.7 million for 21, which is about $1.5 million increase from 2020. Parking program revenue really increased $613,000, and that is a large part to the third-party relationship you have with issuing parking tickets. Expenditures fell in line with revenues. Certainly this year, different than most years, is we spend a lot of time evaluating the city analytically. We expect certain numbers to move in a certain fashion consistently year over year. COVID really affected our ability to analytically evaluate the city because of the additional funds that came in and the additional expenditures that were required as a result of addressing COVID-related needs. So we had to do a little bit more detailed testing, get in the numbers a little bit more detailed this year, just because analytics weren't always by themselves leading us where we needed to be. General fund expenditures, general government, public safety are the largest outflows, followed by capital outlay. The capital outlay had a lot to do with the facility you're sitting in right now, that renovation. So once again, we expected that outflow to occur. We audited the outflow to ensure that all expenditures were captured appropriately and capitalized appropriately. The enterprise funds, the water fund and the sewer fund, water fund net position decreased $119,000 this year. Once again, impacted largely because of COVID. Sewer fund, similarly, now both funds have minimum funding requirements, which allowed you to accrete revenues appropriately, but you certainly weren't generating the types of revenues, particularly the water fund, that you've had historically. So we spent a little time testing that to ensure that that was captured correctly and reflected the activity that actually occurred for the water and sewer fund. And we feel comfortable with that. Other funds, the state accommodations tax fund had an increase of about $421,000. Revenues of $1 million exceeding expenditures and transfers out of approximately $575,000. Local accommodation tax fund reports no fund balance, however, revenues increased $665,000. Local hospitality tax fund had an increase in revenue of about $168,000. Beach preservation fund had an increase of $900,000 or 14% in fund balance due to revenues of $80,000. In transfers of approximately $942,000, exceeding those expenditures that were mentioned earlier. Tourism fund had an increase also. You were required to have a single audit this year, even though you do receive federal funds. You had less than $750,000. We did go in and look at the federal money a little bit just to make sure that we had some compliance, and we're looking over some shoulders, but you weren't required to have a single audit, which periodically you are required to have. I mentioned earlier that we issued two opinions as part of this audit. The second opinion, because you're done under governmental auditing standards, we're required to evaluate your internal control and compliance as we go through our standard procedures. Now, we're not issuing an opinion on internal control, but we're evaluating the controls that we come across as we perform our procedures, and we're obligated to report to you if we run into any sort of internal control issues that we give rise to a significant deficiency or material weakness. And I mentioned the two significant deficiencies earlier. The one, the number of entries we posted as part of the audit, and the second one being segregation. It was a challenging year on a number of fronts, particularly with your finance director being remote, which was not ideal for our purposes, but we are learning how to adopt in the COVID world, and we were able to get the audit completed. Once again, unmodified opinion, sound financial condition, the books and records, with the exception of the audit adjustments we posted, were really good shape, and we enjoy the support that we were provided internally, and happy to report on the no modifications to financial statements. I know that's a lot of data, and I'll certainly pause there for any questions that anybody may have.
Any questions? I don't think so.
Well, I will quit sharing, assuming I can figure that out. And that's all I have this evening, unless there's other questions. Anything else anybody has?
I think that'll do it. I appreciate it. Okay, so Chief Burke, you're up next.
Yes, sir. First of all, I'd like to thank the Mayor and City Council for allowing us this opportunity to make the proposal to you to purchase the cardiac monitor machine to put in the reserve account in this year's fiscal budget. I'm going to introduce Seth Croucher. He's a part-time firefighter with us, but his full-time job is a divisional chief with the Charleston County EMS, where he runs a shift of medic units. I'm going to let him do the presentation on the cardiac. Seth Croucher.
Mr. Mayor's Council, how are you guys? Chief Burke asked me to kind of show you guys the cardiac monitor and what it can do and how it relates to a BLS service, which Folly Beach Public Safety currently is. So cardiac monitor obviously takes a couple batteries, but it can defibrillate, which an AED can do. It can do 12 lead EKGs. It can do 4 lead EKGs, which is a picture of the heart, and we'll go more in depth into these here in a couple seconds. It can pace which we cannot do as a BLS agency. So if you're in a certain heart rhythm and we need to make it go faster and medicines aren't working, we can actually do it for you. It can monitor your blood pressure, temperature, SpO2, CO2, and your actual respirations. So that's kind of an overview, and then I know it's kind of, it might be witchcraft, I guess, for some people, but we're going to go into in-depth what some stuff is here in a second. So it's not just for ambulances. I only made one copy, I apologize. This is the skills certifications for the state, and I highlighted what EMTs are allowed to do in the state, what is in relative to the cardiac monitor. So it's only like the first 2 pages really, I think, it had highlighted stuff on them. So we can provide care, you know, we're doing it today, we do it every day with what we have. This will truly just allow us to do it better. It allows you to monitor interventions that you put in place, whether they're working, whether they're not working, whether there's an issue. And then again, it acts as an AED. It's a lot bigger, a lot fancier, but it's got a lot more options. So how will it help us? Wait, yeah. Every call, right? So we can monitor blood pressure, and it's got tons of compartments in here. We can take blood pressures. We got cuffs for thighs all the way up to little babies. We can monitor the 4-lead EKGs, which is this right here. The 12-lead, which we'll talk about on the next slide, which is on the outside. The oxygen saturation in your blood, which is this little device right here. This would be the Untitled, which is a whole slide dedicated to that as well. And then all of the defibrillation stuff, similar to the AED, is on this left side. Sorry about that. I pre-hooked it up so it'd be quicker. So the same pads that the 17 AEDs that we just bought and every AED we have now, these are the exact same pads. So everything is interchangeable. So if a cop does get on scene first, when you show up with this, you unplug and plug in. There's no switching, there's no pulling the pads off, there's no putting them back on. If you look on the PowerPoint, whichever one suits your visual, just to show you, the 4-lead is what's at the top, that green line, which is obviously the electrical activity in your heart. And you go down one line, that would be the temperature monitoring. The next line down is capnometry, which I'm actually going to show you here in a second by putting it on me. And that is your breathing. You go down one more line, that is the pulse ox, that little white cable, which shows you the amount of oxygen in your blood. So as far as the EKG portion, if you're having chest pain on the island, I believe, and don't quote me on this, that obviously the response times are minimum, I have to be careful, not fast sometimes. So as per the sheet you're getting ready to get, EMTs are allowed to obtain a 12-lead and send it to a hospital. So the hospital will look at the EKG and actually activate the cath lab and call in the surgeon. In fact, Johnny Brinks, who's a volunteer with us, is part of that team that gets called in at Roper when you have an EKG. And the picture is just, the one on the bottom is a good EKG, the one on the top is what an EKG that's not good. Looks like this for reference. Let's go, you're good. The Untitled, you'll see on that list that EMTs can monitor Untitled, which is literally, which we'll show you here in just a second on this monitor, your actual breathing. So if someone isn't breathing, and we put in a king tube, which is the tube that goes in the, it isolates the trachea, and we breathe for you with the back valve mask, which is the bottom picture. It actually monitors your breathing.
Which ones are highlighted?
And it also comes in the same form. So this is the nasal cannula version, which is like if we're just giving oxygen to somebody in respiratory distress. But it's the exact same thing as the one pictured at the bottom with the little line coming off the side. So it monitors the tube we place when we, no, you're fine, sorry. I just had it going that way. when we put it in, and actually, can't go to the next slide. Yeah, sorry. You can see the different waveforms, the purple, and because I'm talking down here, everybody see, I'll bring it down there in a second. You all see the purple waveform. The Untitled, so you'll do this thing on my nose, like literally, I wasn't talking, it looked really cool, like the ones up there, but I'm kind of interrupted it. But if I stop breathing, purple goes away. So if you have a king tube in place and you're bagging somebody and it's dislodged, the bladder has busted, so there's not a good seal. You can actually tell a lot quicker. Sorry about that it's not working. It can also, like the ET tube cuff leaks, obstructions, CPR assessment. So I can tell you that if I put a king airway in somebody and I'm getting an entitled reading of 8 and we do CPR for a certain amount of time, there's just not perfusion going on. No perfusion is not good. So you can evaluate the effectiveness of it. You can evaluate if it goes from 10 to 35 or 50 while you're doing CPR. Most likely you've got a pulse back. And you can see that's the bottom left one. For those with asthma, it can actually tell you if you're having an issue with the oxygen going across at the very end, the bottom of your lungs, which is the shark fin. And then, so if you stop breathing, for those, like if I stop talking and stop breathing. Sorry, but it stops going down. So actually the first upward toke is exhalation. So when you breathe out, it goes up and that's what starts it. So if you have someone who has asthma, they have the shark fins, you can give them albuterol, which we can actually give as a BLS agency. It can tell you how your treatment's going. As far as CPR, it would be way too difficult to set this up so you can see this screen on this monitor with a mannequin that actually has a rhythm. So if you look at your monitor, even with the Lucas device, which you guys graciously got us, the automatic chest compressor, that doesn't fit everyone. It fits most people, but not everyone. So this actually tells you if you're doing good CPR. So again, the top part is the rhythm. If you go down the lines, the white lines that are right next to each other are the depths of compressions. And then further down is the actually inches that you're compressing, the 2.0. The 101 would be how many compressions you're doing a minute. And it actually tells you if you're going too fast, if you're going too slow, if you need, it'll tell you to switch compressors. So if you have, firemen doing CPR for 5 minutes, the depth starts getting less. Actually, that square on the right, which is filled completely white, will shrink down a little bit and it'll have black around the edges. And the goal is to, while it's monitoring the Untitled, which is the 20 and the 12, to fill that white box all the way up. Go to the next slide. So it will allow us to increase and monitor the quality of our care for our most critical patients and provide consistent care for our everyday patients that we have. I know we're not an ALS agency. I know we're working on it, but I've already talked with the state. And if we have the proper equipment, like when I'm working out here, we can respond as an ALS agency. Like I can be a paramedic out here without being licensed as an ALS agency. They call it bumping up, which is the term. And right now we have 2 paramedics that work out here. And you have Colin and kind of Mumford as well. So I do apologize. I'm not the best presenter, and I was made aware that it was going to be televised 20 minutes ago. So
told you that.
I told you should have told me that. And I asked Billy, I don't know what y'all want to see. The Untitled is probably the latest, most cost-effective thing in EMS. That was like mind-blowing. but I'm gonna show you whatever you want, and let you hold it, let you touch it, it won't shock anybody, but, as far as the AED portion, it's the same pads, and you just hit analyze, it's the only difference. Obviously, Charleston County EMS carries these same monitors on every ambulance. Mount Pleasant uses monitors, they are ALS, but they upload to the cloud so the EMS can put it all in one chart. We'll be able to upload the vitals into our same software, ESO. Does anybody want to touch it or hold it or see it closer?
Probably seen it as close as I want to see it the rest of my life.
Yeah. Well, the cable is a little short, but it's pretty fancy. I know that we took some money for the AEDs out of the, I think, right, the 4,000 or whatever.
Well, out of the reserve fund, we took about 4,000 out of the reserve fund of 36,000 to pay for warranty care package for the Lucas device. And so I think we still have right around 32,000 in that reserve fund for that. And what the proposal is also to go ahead and purchase the cardiac monitor. We can get a refurbished one to start out with. And we're in the range of about 25K to 30K on a refurbish, which comes with a 6-month warranty, and you can buy an extended warranty with it. You can use it as a refurbish. And as Seth alluded to, we're not an ALS agency, but me and him were talking the other day, and he checked with the DA certification board and with the state. Yeah, he's a paramedic that works out here part-time. We have another part-time firefighter paramedic from Mount Pleasant who works out here sometimes. Captain Mumford and firefighter Colin Heath soon be certified as paramedics. And also that while the paramedic is working, we could be a part-time ALS agency while they're working on our truck to give this extended care and push the truck. The basic, the BLS, like I said, the EMTs can work this, have it hooked up faster and work it, until the medic unit gets here. Just 3 weeks ago, we had 2 calls that could have been potential serious calls, and we had 30 minutes of response time for the medic unit to get there. So we just stood by and having to monitor the people, and luckily it didn't, worsen or anything like that for the medic units got here. But I'm a firm believer in that. When I first started in public safety back in 1974, became certified as EMT in 1977, and started to do CPR and all that there. We didn't have bag masks, none of that. It was all mouth to mouth. And then as we've gone through our training, more advanced equipment come up, we learn more advanced equipment. We already have AEDs. We have purchased the AEDs that were in the budget. We purchased the Lucas device, which was the first week we had it, we used it 3 times.
First day?
Yeah. Huh?
First day? First day?
First day, yeah. And it was hooked up and it was there. So the more equipment and the more that we can get more definitive care and monitoring situations in these basic calls, waiting on the medic unit, the more we can do, I think we'll have the best outcome. At least give them the chance to have the best outcome. And that's what we're respectfully doing this presentation tonight. Try to go ahead and purchase the cardiac monitor.
So you said 25 to 30 for a refurbished one. How much is a new one?
36.
I did forget to mention, sorry, Chief. These are the pads that come with it. And I know like the Lucas are like, well, why do we need it? This actually works with the Lucas because obviously it's a piece of equipment. So if the Lucas isn't set right, if it's not in the right position, this is a pad that senses that white line that goes down every time you push down. It works with the Lucas, so it's not replacing anything. It's not to be used in place of it. This all works together. It's not whether you're using the Lucas or not. It's if you're doing chest compressions. This little contraption here senses the depth and make sure everything's correct, and fills out that white square or diamond. Whatever they call it.
The new one's about $36.
What's the warranty on a new one?
So the warranty, the only difference between a new and a used one is the cost, and the warranty goes from a year to 6 months. You would most likely want to buy the professional care. It's the same thing on the Lucas. You pay the extra $3,000, and they come once a year, and they go through, like they grease ours, and they put this, I don't know what they do, they work their magic. And also if something's wrong with it, they will come here and fix it. And with my experience, I've worked in logistics for 2.5 years, so I was in charge of fixing monitors. And Lucas, with Zoll, like if you call them and say my monitor's broken, they overnight you a loaner if you need it. So, and then you send that box, has a ship return label when they ship it back.
So when the math is done, what is exactly the difference?
So they
Like
can't.
the math.
So I was telling Cpr just a minute ago, they cannot give us a hard number on a refurbished device because it depends on what we want with it. It's roughly, I think, 8,000 from the 33 to the 25.
Okay, and a new one, I mean, just the end of the game, like the difference between refurbished with the warranties, new with warranties, just
The new with warranties was 36.
36 total.
Yeah, and the actual, I can't, they won't give you a price on the refurbished because they don't know what they have and like they don't know if they're in stock. So
I got it.
With the 2 part-time paramedics, soon to be 4, that can use this device at the ALS level, how much coverage would we have in a given week in terms of scheduling these people? Best case scenario.
Part-time paramedics we have?
In the summertime, I usually work 2 days a week. Sean Carroll does a couple days a month. In the off season, I usually do 1 day a week.
Mumford and Collin can also operate.
When they get certified.
Oh, they're not certified then? So how many certified people do we have total? Just
Paramedic?
for whoever can operate that machine?
Oh, well, we got, Tate, Mumford, Colin, myself.
As a paramedic, you have 2.
Okay.
Anybody that works for us, because we have 1 EMT per shift, can do everything that I showed you a second ago. I was on the thing.
But not utilize the device to its full capability.
Yes. That would be, in all honesty, the only thing different would be the analyze button for the shocking. Like as a paramedic, when I get on scene, I put the monitor on you, the 4 lead and the 12 lead, and I interpret it. That's really the only difference is I don't interpret it. I send it to the hospital to be interpreted.
And it's the 12 lead that does that, not
Yes.
the 4 lead?
And the EMTs are certified to put the 12 lead on and send it, but they cannot interpret it.
So back to Amy's question, how long until those next 2 are certified? Because right now, it sounds like we only have 1 day a week, we can really use the machine.
Captain Mumford, he fixes to take a certification test, his written test and the practical test. And Colin should be through with his paramedic training by at least April 2022. And then he'll have to take the certification test. So by the end of the fiscal year, we should have 2 full-time medics on board, along with the 2 part-timers.
But back up a second. So EMTs can use
Yes.
the
EMTs
machine
can do everything I did, like literally everything I did
in
today.
the presentation. So
That
how
was
many
the whole-
EMTs do we have?
We got,
More than 1 a shift.
yeah, we have, 8 full-time EMTs, I believe, 7 full-time EMTs and part-time EMTs from other agencies. We have probably about 5 of those that work with us, part-time, also EMT.
So we have people who can do everything he said in the presentation. They just can't.
That the Lucas machine doesn't do. I'm just trying to see the difference between the 2 machines and what the advantage is having this one over the other ones if we're not.
So there are 2 completely different machines. The Lucas device is it literally is automatic CPR. It goes around your chest, and we can probably Google a YouTube video of the Lucas, and it would show you a picture of it. Be super helpful right now. And it goes around the chest and puts a suction cup right in the center of your chest. You pull the suction cup down, and you hit start, and it just starts doing CPR, like a literally CPR, and it squeezes the suction cup between a metal plate under the back. So that is literally just doing compression. So with our 2 to 3 people, and even with the fire department, we usually have to call for mutual aid for full arrest because you want to switch out compressors every 2 minutes so you can keep that white line at 2 inches. So the Lucas device is strictly it only does compressions. It doesn't tell you anything. This evaluates, like making sure it's going the correct depth. And it would be the one on the left, the one that says that one. That's what the Lucas device is.
And the AEDs then, is that different than this?
Yes, the AEDs, you pull them out, you put the same pads on, and you hit start, and it tells you what to do. So it'll say, stop doing compressions. It'll say, shock advised, not advised, restart compressions, or whatever. It doesn't.
This is different than that.
Yeah.
Also,
And they've been ordered, we've got how many on order?
17.
17?
17.
When do we order those?
When
do we order those?
It's been about 3 weeks ago we ordered it. Yeah, the order was placed. Yes, sir.
Was there,
We hadn't got them yet.
was there a delay? I mean, cause why
There
was
was
it approved
some,
for July and we ordered them at the end of, you said the end of October?
yeah, after the last, council meeting we had, y'all asked the question, have they been ordered yet? 3 days later, me and Chief Gilruth were talking about it. We went ahead and got the quote on them. We ordered them, we sent the requisition in to be approved on the PO, and we did get a PO approval number. And so Raymond Lloyd ordered them about 2.5, 3 weeks ago.
So is it when staff ask follow-up questions did somebody ask a follow-up question on this machine?
Yeah.
I mean, you didn't order AEDs until somebody had a follow-up question in October. Yet nobody had a follow-up question about this machine, but so does it take council to ask a question to execute something that's in the budget?
No, sir. Y'all asked the chief that question last council meeting, and we had them in the budget, and
I just wonder why that wasn't executed in July.
I don't know. I don't have an answer for you.
Yeah.
y'all fought for them pretty hard.
Huh?
Y'all fought for them pretty hard at the budget time. That would have been something, I agree, you think that would be something you'd order immediately when the budget starts.
So that's a good
It's separate
news.
from this, but that's the same question.
Yeah, I started to see it's not.
All right, so that's the good news is that we did that. So now this is in addition to what, I just want to be clear about the numbers. So we did that, we checked things off the list.
Mhm.
Is this a new ballpark 36,000?
Yes.
Is this the extra?
Totally new machine.
Okay, got
Well,
it.
we've got
That
it
we
now
have to order right now.
No, okay,
So if we got this, the AED there wouldn't be an AED on the engine. This would act as that would be the AED on the engine.
got it.
It's not like you don't use them together or anything.
So all the AEDs are going in every patrol car.
That right now, that's the plan. We're gonna have a AED in every patrol car with patrol vehicles, 12 patrol vehicles we have on each squad. And then the other 5, I think we planning on maybe putting 2 in City Hall, 1 in the community center and the public works building, the other 5.
How fast can you ramp up that training?
We just discussed that today. They can start training any day. In fact, they've already had some CPR AED training here recently with a couple of the city hall staff doing it. It's what's the day class? How many days is that training? CPR and AED is 8 hours, 16 hours?
Or just most likely an 8-hour class. However, with the AEDs, it's self-explanatory. I mean, it's not self-explanatory. I'm sorry, it's not a horrible statement. It literally walks you through it. So you turn it on, hit start. I can hand it to you, and it says open the pads, place pads on chest. Start CPR, then stop CPR, analyzing, don't touch it. So for the masses, like you could, as soon as they come in, you could put them in City Hall, and then should someone that works here want to take the first aid CPR classes, there are tons of different levels. So if you want to teach somebody how to use a BBM, there's a whole nother, which is that the baggy squeeze. There's a whole nother class for that. Like it's just another, it just depends on what you want the people to learn. Even with Ashley, there's CPR, there's healthcare provider CPR, which includes the BBM, and there's one that adds an EpiPen. There's tons of different choices, but that shouldn't hold up when they come out into the wall. Yeah, it's, airports have them. I mean,
Churches have them.
so their AEDs are super friendly, super easy to use.
And when is this coming up for us to vote on? Because it's not on there tonight.
Probably December. We'll have it
Okay.
ready for December.
Or we can ask more questions then. I don't think we need to be the dead horse tonight. I mean, it's just not fun when you're talking about life-saving stuff, but yet you've got, questions like we've had tonight. We can get to them in December.
Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you,
I
gentlemen.
really appreciate it.
I'll start. We can clear exactly what
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
like, this is Bible. That was. Remember next question.
Let's see.
Agree.
So, ordinance 4021 is a proposed 90-day moratorium on new construction permits in the commercial districts. That's the Island Commercial District and the Downtown Commercial District. And the reason we're proposing this is our ongoing work for the commercial district rezonings, which we've got a special work session on Thursday, the 11th. In addition to Dominion Energy questions about underground power lines for this listening home, we're also going to talk about the commercial district work. When we started, I think we maybe didn't do the best job of getting you the why behind the what, and so it bogged down and it hasn't progressed beyond proposals. We don't have any ordinances yet to be made pending or even to send to the planning commission for public hearing. So since we're already about 90 days into it, and we're basically starting over on Thursday, we know it's going to take us a few more months to get ready to even have an ordinance, something in ordinance form to send off to the planning commission. And so the earliest we can make anything pending, which would affect the new permit applications, realistically, 2 months from now, if everything was swimmingly perfect at all the work sessions and everybody agreed with what we're doing, we could hammer out the details, we could get those remaining to the planning commission. So in the absence of any pending ordinance or any finalized proposals, this is all up in the air, and we're currently going as is. So at any moment now, someone could walk in and permit some of the things that we're trying to stop. And we know that the further we get into this, the more pressure will be on the folks out there to get in what they want to do before we, kind of racing them situation. So what we'd like you guys to consider is just a 90-day pause to get the work sessions a little further along to see how much traction it gets, where it goes. I believe the moratorium can be ended early if we
That sounds great.
2 months from now, it just completely falls apart at the
I think
council.
we'll do it next Thursday during our work session, because I think that's when we're gonna get our who's, whys, what's, and where's answered. We
Right.
haven't gotten yet. I mean, last time we didn't have enough time to ask questions without, comments.
So I think the timing for this, PJ, is, one, tell you guys now, and then in 2 days, we'll have, the work session, the special work session. But this moratorium, this 90-day moratorium wouldn't go effective until December.
Well-
So you guys would have,
All
Right.
right, minor correction. The soonest it can go into effect is a special meeting a week from now. So a moratorium has to have 2 readings to go into effect. We can set the effective date whenever. If we went Thursday and you guys were on board with everything, we could have a special meeting as early as a week from now to get a second reading and make it.
Can we still advertise next Thursday's meeting as a special meeting? If we do this
Oh, yeah.
tonight, if we say yes tonight, and we talk about it in a work session Thursday, that makes me feel a lot better. If I know it's gonna go into effect right after that. But if we're putting something now, and then we meet next week and we can't do anything for another couple weeks, that doesn't make sense.
Right, yeah, so the way it would work is tonight would be first reading, it's actually this Thursday, the 11th, in 2 days, it's the work session.
Right.
And then as soon as we can meet again to make the moratorium, it'd be 1 week from today. So we could meet on Thursday, sound everybody out, and then come back for a special meeting next week to get this second reading and make it effective.
Or it could just.
Can I just ask that? It seems like we kind of got a little discombobulated with this timeline on this whole project. Because when it came out a couple months ago, we got a brief rundown about it and then nothing else. And then we didn't hear anything about it for a while. Now, I asked for the work session because all of us were a little confused by it. We wanted to get the who's, what, and the 7 W's answered. But now we're putting a moratorium in, and now we can't even put it in effect for a couple weeks. So we're just telling everybody in the world what we're doing. There's gonna be like a mad dash to be able to get permits to do stuff while we're waiting to put a moratorium in effect, because we've already discussed it now at this point.
So you can put this moratorium in effect
In 1 week.
in a week.
Right.
If you vote on it tonight, in a week.
Right.
And this moratorium come about, Mr. Folly should have been listed as the sponsor, so I'm gonna let him speak.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea to kind of pump the brakes on development in the island commercial and the downtown commercial area. And everybody has some idea about development that we want, some development that we don't want. And you're right, nothing's been decided. But we get our introduction to it on Thursday, but the longer we wait, the greater the opportunity is that someone can get the paperwork submitted and something that we might not want beats us to the punch.
Fully understand what you're talking about, and I agree with that. But 2 months ago, we had a brief introduction to it, where if anybody was paying attention, like, oh, they're gonna talk about this. So they're gonna start rushing to get stuff through, and even now, we can't put a moratorium into effect until after we've had a work session on it, a week after a work session.
No,
So now,
not
almost
a week after the work session, a
Almost
week
a
after the date.
5 days after a work session, I'm sorry. Close enough. So 5 days after work session, where now everybody can see us talking and working on what we wanna see and all that stuff. So then you can still get a mad dash to get permits before a moratorium goes into effect. Would it have been, if we got timing a little better on that? Would
Well,
it
if
have
you
worked
thought
out?
about it 2 months ago, like you just thought about it last week, we would have done it 2 months
Maybe,
ago.
you're right, maybe we should have done it 2 months ago.
Or not gotten an introduction 2 months ago.
But not postponing it any longer just makes things worse.
Oh, 100% now we're behind 8 ball.
Okay, so being forward thinking, then now moving from that, what are we thinking exactly about doing? Is there a sense of urgency? We look at December, our regular meeting. We have a work session in 2 days. Are we saying the following week? And if we do,
I'm saying if this gets passed tonight, we have a work session in 2 days. We're gonna set a special meeting 1 week from today
Yep.
for the second reading.
got it.
So this will be done. So anything you do in the work session, you got 90 days to do whatever you're gonna do, and if it's gonna take longer than 90 days, you come back and you can extend this if you want to.
I'm clear.
And in terms of the actual ordinances themselves, after the first work session, Katie went back and drafted 95% of the actual ordinances, and that's what we presented the last time, the actual ordinances, and that's where we bogged down. So the actual proposals are in ordinance form, waiting for your review at the work session on Thursday. So depending on how well that goes, they could be ready to be remanded as soon as December, or if we need more work, they could be work session in December, or work session again in January, and remanded in February. But the actual ordinance themselves have already been drafted and presented. It's just going back and making sure everyone is grounded in where they came from and is okay with it.
I had asked Katie to share with me a link to, it turned out to be a link to the zoning map, which I just sent through email to Wes. Wes, do you have that
Yes,
on your computer? Could you bring up the zoning map?
Let me rejoin.
Possibly. thank you. And, yeah, maybe zoom in on that lower right quadrant, if possible. Perfect. So the dark red is the downtown commercial district, and many of you, if not all of you, spent time with this before. And the pinkish is the island commercial. So my question is, do we need to include in this moratorium all of island commercial? Because island commercial does include the marina, Sunset Cay, it includes Bowen's Island, it includes obviously a large swath of East and West Ashley in both directions, East and West Arctic in both directions, where we're really focused on sort of what's immediately off of Center Street.
So we're focused on the full island commercial district in relation to Arctic and East Ashley and West Ashley. I was, during our special work session, going to talk to you guys about Sandbar and what that maybe doesn't need to be island commercial anymore. And Bowen's Island is also island commercial. So those are topics that we were going to discuss. And I think those could be adjustments that are made at the second reading, depending on how the special work session goes.
To potentially take them out of the moratorium.
To have some more specific wording, or if we rezone those quicker, then the full rezoning of what we're doing for the commercial district, the corridor is what I want to call it. But Sandbar, I think, operates more as residential 2-family, because it's you're not gonna put a business up there. I think it was done that way initially because there was a lot of multi-family units up there. There's really only 2 lots. One actually is for sale right now that they just had an offer made, a little flag lot above 72 Sandbar. They're, I think, looking to put a duplex, and they would be affected by this. And then Bowen's Island Road is zoned island commercial.
I think we need to leave it all in to effect right now, because the end of Sandbar Lane is not, there's no reason not to put a business at the end of Sandbar Lane. If I bought that place, that would make a heck of a good restaurant on the river.
And so if council, if council's cool with that, and you know, we don't want to rezone that to residential 2-family, or if we want to keep it that way.
I'm not saying we don't want to rezone it. I'm just saying right now, it all needs to be in the moratorium.
It's definitely up to us.
Yes.
It's up to council.
Yeah, and
Okay,
so, and
just
so
make sure
that's,
it's up to council, so let's leave it all in there.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the work session. If we want to pull anything out at that point, it's easier to pull something out of something moratorium on second reading and add it back in.
Absolutely.
So let's go that route. You know, I mean, I think it sounds smarter, I mean, safer.
I agree.
Yeah.
Fine with that.
Okay. Any other questions? I'll give you 5 minutes for a break.
Use it all.
Yeah, well, you know, we could have used 5 more minutes.
I figured it out. It was the Session. That is a bit.